Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast.
I'm Kat Fields-White.
And I'm Bridget Myers. We're longtime farmers market managers, educators, and consultants. Get ready to catch up on all things farmers market pros with us. Today, we're chatting about the questions we're hearing from our followers and providing some answers and insights.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Sticker Mule. Sticker Mule is the fastest and easiest way to buy custom printed products. Order online in minutes, and they'll turn your designs and illustrations into custom stickers, magnets, buttons, labels, and packaging. Those little ceramic pins are the best. Sticker Mule offers free online proofs, free worldwide shipping, and super fast turnaround. You'll often get your products in just days. Find more information by clicking their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. We love hearing from our listeners and followers on social media, our past conference attendees, and of course, our own current vendors at the 3 markets we run every week here in San Diego.
Love following the Farmers Market Pros group, that private Facebook group. All you have to do is to sign up is click over there, answer the 3 qualifying questions, and we'll add you to that group. Terribly helpful. This isn't exactly a Q&A episode because we don't necessarily have the answers, but we have some answers. And we have a lot of insights that come from our many years at markets and also the network of market pros that we keep in touch with regularly on various forums. We're on a couple of other listservs. I do a meeting that I facilitate for Farmers Market Coalition. So we talk to a lot of market folks.
Yes, all of our market folk friends. And so we talk about questions that people post in the groups or chatting with us. And we always ask them to post them in the group. Like if you have questions or if you want to discuss something, like post it in the group because you'll get a lot of input. So sometimes people will private message us questions, like through Instagram or send us an email with a question, which that's always fine too. But it's kind of better if you post it out into a group of your peers, your market manager peers, because while we are the farmers market pros, I'd say, so are you. You can be too. I feel like everyone in that group, I mean, if you're doing this work, you're also a pro, right? If you're running a market, like you're doing the job, you're doing the work. And maybe we've spent more time doing it and we've, done more education for ourselves to kind of make us able to answer more questions. But there's a lot of people in the group that I learn stuff in that group all the time.
And a variety of perspectives can be really helpful because each market's different.
Yeah.
So what we've learned from being we've got large and small markets, but in a particular geographic area, for instance, you might be having an issue that's really relevant to your own area, whether to how your community reacts to things or to your local regulations. So popping it out there so that more than one person can express an opinion or provide an answer can be super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, quickly, since this episode is airing the week of something special that we are doing, if you're in our farmers market group or if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see that I did put a shout out last week that it is the 1-month countdown to National Farmers Market Week. I think we're down to 3 weeks now because this was last week. So we're 3 weeks away. It is August 6th through the 12th. So it's coming right up. National Farmers Market Week is always a really exciting time to do something special at your market. And we are asking for all of your help. We want to hear from you and share your National Farmers Market Week plans with our Tent Talk podcast listeners. So if any of you listening can take just a few minutes and send us a recorded message, we want it to be between like 30 seconds and a minute and a half. It's not a hard stop, but that's kind of enough to get the information out there. Tell us your name, your market name, and where you're located, your position at the market. So if you're a manager or a board member or operator, or if you're a vendor or farmer, we want to hear that too. And what you have planned for this year's celebration or something fun that you've done in the past. Either something fun that has worked out that's been really great, or maybe something that you did that was kind of a flop or had some issues that you weren't thinking of when you first planned it.
That could be helpful too.
Yeah, any tips for success or tips to avoid failure would be great. So anything you can use a voice memo app on your phone if your phone comes with one, or you can download a free one. I know I didn't know how to do this, and I just went on the Google Play Store and downloaded a free voice memo app. Really easy to record my voice. You can do it again and again until you get, what you want out there. And then you just email it to us. So you can just send that voice memo via email. It'll come over in the right format, and you can send it to connect@farmersmarketpros.com. So you can get that email address on our website as well if you lose track of this. So please help us out and send us your voice memos. We can't wait to hear that. And we'll put them in next week's episode, along with a little insights from what we're doing at our markets and our tips and tricks as well. So get excited for that.
What we're hearing from Farmers Market Coalition too.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, Farmers Market Coalition has great. They're doing the whole National Farmers Market Week kind of campaign. So they have great information on their website. So go check that out and download the toolkit, since we're just mere weeks away.
We are. Crept up on us.
Now,
This year has kind of flown by.
I literally should ask Haley to clip every year, the last 5 years that we've done this podcast, because every year we go, wow, that really snuck up on us. It should just be us 5 years in a row.
We could totally.
Because every year I feel that way. The summer's busy. So it's okay. And it's okay if it's sneaking up on you too. Don't get panicked. There's plenty of things you can do. Don't worry. We're with you.
Still time.
So today we're going to talk about just some kind of they're not similar topics, but they're all kind of market operations and participation questions that we've been hearing lately that we wanted to talk about on the podcast, and then just give our little insights. Like Kat said, maybe we don't have the answers to everything, but maybe some input from us. And we thought that would be helpful for all of our amazing listeners.
That's right. And we share a little bit of some of the answers that have come back from people in the group too.
Yeah, for sure. So here are some of the questions that we are hearing lately. A vendor at one of our markets asked how to handle a neighboring vendor who is frequently out of their booth. Shoppers ask for help with their products, sometimes disrupting conversations the vendor who is present is having with their own customers. How should that be handled between vendors, or should the market manager step in?
Do we have something in our rules about you have to stay in your booth the majority of the time? I feel like we do.
I feel like we should review our rules. But yes, I feel like I am frequently telling vendors, hey, this is the rule. You need to stay in your booth.
Reminding vendors.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Demanding. Just kidding.
Yeah. And so, obviously everybody has to take a bio break from now and again.
Yeah.
We are sort of doing the math and calculating for a couple of our vendors lately what it costs to go feed your meter every hour in our 1 hour parking meter sort of area versus what it would cost to just park in one of the local garages or lots, or get there super early and find that free space that's going to be available all day, because it may seem like you're paying less to use the meter, but if you're gone every hour and it takes you, even 10 minutes, maybe 15 to walk to your car, feed the meter, come back, how many sales did you miss during that period? And so you need to take that into the calculation. We're helping them with the math.
Yes, please remember the math. And also, what I like to tell our vendors is, if you were waitressing or serving at a restaurant, would you be able to leave every 2 hours and go feed your meter? Absolutely not. No. You couldn't walk away from your tables. If you had an office job, could you leave every 2 hours and go feed your meter? I don't think so. There's 1,000 restaurants in our very busy downtown urban area. And I understand that parking is sometimes very tricky at many markets, including our main, our Saturday and Wednesday markets. So I understanding that it's a little tricky, but somehow for the last 15 years, 98% of our vendors have figured it out, and it's really to the benefit of the vendor's business to stay in their booth.
Absolutely. As a customer, I know I get frustrated. I know you get frustrated, Bridget.
Yeah.
By being at a booth, you're in a hurry. You're trying to get your shopping done. You're at a booth. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
You can't buy the product. You get aggravated. And when shoppers get aggravated at a single booth, that sort of general feeling of, these guys are just never ready. It's hard to buy here. I have to go to each individual booth. If they're not there, they're screwing up my time. I'm trying to scoot through and get my shopping done before I take my kid to soccer. So they have a whole feeling about farmers markets that they're hard to shop at. So you're not only disadvantaging yourself, but you're really kind of casting a shadow on the whole market, including your neighbors. That's not fair.
Yeah. We're all on the same team here, and we kind of have to play nice. It would be like if we were late and we didn't set up the barricades and close the street until about 20 minutes into the market space, and they couldn't set up and they lost those sales time. That would reflect poorly on their business if we weren't ready.
Sure.
So if they're not ready, it reflects poorly on our business. And I have had that. That's really the main conversation I have with our vendors and farmers who do step away from their booth too often is, hey, you're really affecting your neighbor's sales. And then they really kind of reflect on it and are like, oh, like usually they don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
They don't see the problem. They don't see the frustrated customers because they're not there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they don't understand that it's a frustrating thing. So just kind of taking the time to explain why that is a rule at your market. That is, I mean, I feel like I've never had anybody push back and say, no, I need to be out of my booth. They
Right.
usually just come to an understanding and they figure out a different way to be there and be in their booth for, I mean, if it's like a 4-hour, 6-hour market, they can
Be there most of the
you
time.
can be there. Yeah. I mean, understanding you have to use the restroom and things happen, whatever, but going to feed a meter or going to go shopping during the market, I do understand the temptation in that, but really vendors need to figure out how to, work something out with their fellow vendors where everyone kind of does a little 15-minute shop at the end of the market, like break down, and then they get to kind of pass their stuff around or come to a market when you're not working it. I mean, we all have to figure that out. So that
Yeah.
has to be worked out with them.
I feel like I'm always shopping at other people's markets.
Oh, me
Because I'm
too.
too busy at our markets to actually get out and shop. I do, if I'm not scheduled that day, it's great. But
Oh,
it's tough.
I was just at the North Park Market in our neighborhood here, which we used to run, but we don't run anymore. I was shopping last week and the vendors are like, "What are you doing here?" Like so confused why I was there. I was there with my kids. I go, "I come here to shop because it's really hard when I'm really busy at work. I can't always do my full shopping. Like I'll grab a couple things at the market when I'm working, but I need to, I have a list.
Yeah.
And so I need to go get all of my things and I can't really focus on that if I'm also at work. So I go to other markets."
Yeah, you just got to figure it out. And
Yeah.
then you have the vendors that are out of their booth because their buddy works across the aisle and they're
Mhm.
over there just hanging out and chit-chatting. That one is aggravating.
Yeah.
I mean, that obviously if you have to go to the restroom, that's a thing. You don't have to be over chatting with your fellow vendor during the market, and because you're also affecting his sales, not to mention aggravating the customers at your booth.
Yeah.
In terms of the vendor that's asking this, so I think there's two things about that. Obviously, in all problems in the world, the first suggestion is to talk to the person that's causing the problem
Mhm.
nicely.
Yeah.
I understand in this heightened environment sometimes of people taking offense at suggestions and things that can be weird, but hopefully overall you get along with your neighbors well enough that you can say, hey, you know what, I don't mind kind of keeping one eye on your booth while you run to the restroom once each market, but I can't actually be doing this really regularly because it's interfering with my sales. So I would try just a person-to-person conversation first.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they either are defensive about it or they say yes, but then ignore it and continue what they're doing, at that point, by all means, talk to your manager and say, hey, I don't know how to handle this. The person next to me is just never there. It's really affecting my sales. I can see that their customers are aggravated, and ask the manager to step in. And then as a manager, you probably want to observe that a little bit for yourself first, because there's always the he said, she said thing. Maybe it's not unreasonable and you just got somebody that's a little bit impatient and doesn't want to cover it all when their neighbor's gone. So I would observe a little bit myself, but then I would have a talk with that person that's out of their booth a lot. It does affect their neighbor. It does affect the whole market. And as a manager, that's your job. Our job is weird, but that's not a weird thing. That is your job, to make sure that the market runs smoothly and that everybody's getting the full advantage of taking that space, renting that space from you to work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And there's usually an amicable result. I feel like
Yeah,
I've never
sure.
had, I mean, usually once you explain that, it's like, these are small business owners. They understand that every moment is precious and they need to be making sales and,
right.
it usually
Yeah,
works
they
out.
usually
It's
get
usually just vendors that just they're not even thinking about that.
Right.
So it's just like, oh, whoops, like I wasn't thinking about that. So just bringing it to their attention is the way to get this resolved.
Yeah. I find most vendors too develop a relationship with one of their neighbors where they watch each other's booths
Oh,
when
yeah.
they really have to be out for a bio break or what have you.
Yes. And as long as they're on a good system that feels equal to both of them, then that's great.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
Mhm.
All right. Next one up. It's a little more complicated. It feels a little more complicated. Definitely doesn't feel like we have an answer, but we will share
We're gonna
some
try.
thoughts. One of our online community members asked, with the recent Supreme Court decision that allows businesses to deny service to LGBTQIA plus people on a general level, do markets have, or are they adding non-discrimination rules into their guidelines? So, this is one of those issues that we'll discuss, but it kind of wanders into a legal framework. And so we do want to point out, we're not lawyers. This is strictly observation and maybe some opinion. It's not legal advice. This is so complicated that one of the things that you might want to do is look at the Farmers Market Legal Toolkit, and they're at farmersmarketlegaltoolkit.org, easy enough to find. And we're going to be reaching out to them probably on an upcoming episode, because this is a fairly recent court decision. So there may not be something entirely clear in the toolkit yet, but I'm guessing that they're probably thinking about it and talking about it, and we'll keep sharing it here. So it's, it's something to think about. So what we had responded to that person in the community is that we definitely have clear intentions and clear statements in our rules that as a market, we're welcoming to all. And in fact, we make really deliberate moves and we're real proactive about making sure that our vendor spaces are open to everyone. We do a lot to make sure that there's equity in our application process and that we're helping to repair things for vendors that may not have had access to the markets before. So we're really, really conscious about that. And just to clarify, we had asked, are you talking about that kind of thing or about adding language that would encourage your vendors to be anti-discriminatory? And I think that's where, as it turned out, that's kind of more where she was going. And because that's new, actually, that's something that generally speaking, we haven't had to address, although I feel like during the whole uprising and the anti-racist conversations that we've had, there have been some things that have come up about a farmer or a vendor, for instance, that wears messaging on a t-shirt that's not welcoming to Black people or to the opposing
political
group.
Political. Yeah, we had someone that was even on both sides too. If you're having
if you're anti-Republican on your shirt, or
anti-conservative,
making derogatory comments in things that you say or that things that you're wearing
while you're in the market space. It's like, where are we drawing that line and what are we doing to address it consistently and clearly?
Right. Yeah. So there's some questions about, are you actually putting that into your rules, saying that in this space, we understand that on a legal basis or on a community standards level or something, you may think it's okay to not serve people that you don't agree with, but in this space, in this market, we're welcoming to everybody. And so are we putting that kind of language in our rules? Are we having those conversations with our vendors? Again, without being a lawyer, I think that that's probably acceptable, that we can say in this space, in this event that we manage, that we operate, you have to welcome everybody that shows up. And if you've listened to this tent talk more than twice, you know that is our opinion, that markets should be welcoming to all, that markets are changing places by encouraging people to come together. And even if they have some differences of opinion on various things, they can still all be together in one space and be a community.
Yep. This is food access. This is cultivating community. And this is about being together, not pushing people apart.
Right.
Yeah.
And, the Supreme Court decision was on that one group of folks. But anytime you get into that, it's a slippery slope. So if you're okay with your vendors not serving people who have a gender orientation that they don't agree with, as though that's something that should be voted on, are you also okay with them not serving people of another race or people of another religion or people of another political party? So it's a very slippery slope, and certainly not something that we want to encourage. We want to encourage welcoming to the entire community. But it is something to think about right now.
Yeah, it is something to think about and kind of get your thoughts in order ahead of time, just before you might run into an issue. Hopefully you don't. And hopefully, I feel, badly for any farmers market manager or vendor who's having to even think about this if it's happening at their market. But hopefully it's not something that's going to be common, especially amongst farmers markets. And because we just seem to be kind of a space of more welcoming and acceptance. And hey, we're just here to shop and we don't try to pick sides. But yeah, hopefully it's not going to be an issue, but to kind of get ahead of it and say, okay, what am I going to do to get kind of the word out to my vendors and farmers and just be explicit and be really clear and just say, hey, we need to be open to everybody. Like, this is not something we endorse. Like, every shopper that comes into the market is going to be welcomed by every vendor. And that's just it.
Welcome and treated with respect.
And treated with respect. And that's where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And my feeling is really, if you don't want to do that, that's where our market is positioned. If you don't want to do this might not be the market for you. This might not be the platform for you to sell.
And that's, we've had that discussion about many things. I've had vendors that could not be on time. And I said, you know what? I know some farmers market managers let vendors come in a little bit late. That's their prerogative and their rules, as long as they're not, driving their cars onto the event space or whatever, like legally violating anything. But I have had conversations with vendors where it's like, look, I understand that you don't want to be on time or you can't be on time. This market is requiring that you're on time. And so if that doesn't work for you, you can go be successful at other markets. It's okay. Like, I won't be offended. You don't have to be offended. If there's a difference of understanding here, it's okay. And usually it's like, okay, yeah, I don't think I could be on time. I'll go to this other market where it's a little more relaxed. This
Yeah.
is a welcoming market. We are going to accept every shopper here. If that doesn't sit with you correctly, or if that's not something that you can do, that you just can't find it in yourself to do, then you know what?
There's other places to sell.
Don't be a business. I'm just kidding. That's my opinion. But there's other places in,
Yeah, sell online,
the
sell in a
world.
different
Yes.
market, sell wholesale so that you don't have to come face to face with the people buying your
Yes.
products. All kinds of different things you can do.
Yes. And while of course there's legal things we have to follow, this is your space and you get to set the tone and you get to set the rules for your space.
Right.
So really, be empowered to do that.
Yeah, we always suggest being upfront.
Yep.
Clear communication solves 90% of the world's problems, I think.
Don't be vague.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So the next one we have is we have a vendor who seems to be having business problems and has sunk into a big victim mentality. They blame the market for their troubles, even though they set up their booth late. Oh, just talking about that. Call out of markets and generally aren't engaging with their shoppers. They are emailing our board and also lobbying other vendors to complain about the market manager. How do we deal with this?
Yeah.
This
So
is
many
tough.
ways. So
Yeah.
many ways. It's tough. Document. That's the short answer.
1000%.
Yeah, 1000%. I will say on the board thing, we've always been really, really lucky that our board empowers our manager. So if somebody emails the board about something, they send it right back to us. They say, that's something you'll need to work out with the manager. We've empowered them to run the market. This is something that the two of you need to come to a conclusion on. And
Yes.
it's tough when you've got a board that's not like that wants to take up opinions from 6 different directions and things, because it turns into sort of a bad parenting deal where, if I can't get what I want from mom, I'll go ask dad.
Yeah.
And so that can get really tough to maintain consistency there. I mean, obviously, if you got a true personal issue going on between a manager and a vendor or a manager and a farmer, and the board has to step in, then what you want to do is put all those people together in the same place. But the board can't be kind of picking and choosing what they hear from one person and what they hear from another person without making those folks talk to each other.
And like overstepping the market manager. That's
Right.
just really, we've heard that plenty of times. Lots of questions. We've talked about it at the conference, had some of our own experience with our past markets that we've run. It's really if the board doesn't believe in the manager and doesn't trust the manager to make the best decisions for the market, that you're already having an issue.
Right.
And as a market manager, it would make sense to advocate for yourself and to say, hey, you hired me, or I came to you and asked if I could run this market, and we had an agreement where I would be the point person, I'd be the operator of this market. These are the reasons that you should trust me. I have this experience. These are the things that I've proven I can do. This is how I think that these kind of situations should be handled. If anyone goes above my head and goes to the board, I'd like you to say, you know what? The manager is entrusted with those decisions and they're the ones that make these decisions. We're not going to overstep them unless you're having a serious issue.
Right.
So getting ahead of that would be helpful, but it sounds like this vendor is already going to the board. We don't know how the board's reacting to this, but it just sounds like they're being a little relentless with their kind of complaint and like many, many complaints. And it can be really draining and distracting.
Sure.
Yeah.
It says they're also lobbying other vendors to complain about the market manager. So,
tough.
I mean, that for us comes into, we have one of our rules, and we have, the whole big set of rules, but then we have our kind of top 10 rules that we make sure to reinforce. Be set up and selling on time. Don't break down early. And one of them is you're required at the market to show respect for your fellow vendors, the market staff. That's just it. It's basically play nice with others kind of thing. And so if you're complaining about the market manager to other vendors, that's a problem. If you have a complaint about the market manager, you should express it to the market manager, who's somebody who can do something about it. Other vendors can't really do something about it. And so kind of spreading a negative attitude is not helpful. And we have told vendors in the past, and I'm kind of pleased that we haven't had this kind of issue with a vendor in a long time, but way back kind of in the beginning, we had a couple of vendors that were and I think they didn't like the rules. We're very consistent with our rules.
They didn't want to be on time.
Yeah. And so they would, talk to other vendors and say, oh, well, let's sign a petition or let's complain about this. You really want to complain to somebody that can do something about it. And we're usually clear about that. Don't spread negativity with people that can't solve your problem. Come to the person that can solve your problem.
And don't ask like clarifying questions with other vendors because it's just playing a game of telephone. Just come straight to the source. Like we're very open and I like vendors ask me questions all the time where I'm like, you should totally know that. But you know what? I'm happy to kind of review things and go over rules and things like that. So going to vendors is never really the way to go. Sounds like this person is really causing an issue for like the peace at the market. It doesn't say if the vendors are getting on their side or not,
Yeah.
but I mean, sometimes even worse if they're harassing vendors to get on their side and the vendors are saying no and don't want to do that. It's like that can be really a hindrance of the vendors.
Divisions and fights and things. It sounds to me, I mean, from the description, and there's a longer description in the original questions that we were sent, but it sounds to me like this is a person who's struggling maybe with something that has nothing to do with the market.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a personal issue. It sounds like they're just really unhappy. There's something that's stressing them out that sounds like maybe it doesn't really have anything to do with the market.
They're just funneling that kind of energy toward the market because that's proximity wise what they're doing every week. And so they're just kind of taking it out of on the market, which I understand could happen. I mean, that happens in life, right? If you have a personal issue, sometimes you take it out on something that seems
totally
like the
unrelated.
easy thing to take it out on. It's unrelated. So that's tough, especially if your vendor's been with you for a long time and you care about them. I mean, this does happen with vendors that have been in markets for many years that they're like your family and then they're just having some struggles and
just
they
like
turn it on you.
misdirected aggression or anxiety oftentimes goes towards a family member because that's who you trust to not not be done with you in life if you take it out on them.
Yeah.
Long-term vendors can feel like that about the market, that they're never going to get kicked out. They've been there a long time. They know they're surrounded by people who care about them. So they let stress out that may be coming from an entirely different part of their life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, the way to deal with that is say, it sounds like you're really stressed out. It sounds like your business isn't doing well here, and that's frustrating to you. I get it. Maybe it's time to take a little bit of time off, maybe take a month off and kind of think it through and decide if this is really the right direction for you. Do you want to be a market vendor? Is there something you could change about your business? Obviously, you want to try to take smaller nurturing steps first, maybe suggest, hey, you know what? I saw somebody do a display that was like this that helped their sales. Might want to be, maybe something you want to think about. So give them some tips first to try and help them. But if they're still just seem to be really slogged down and maybe they're having an issue outside the market, it might be helpful to suggest a break.
Yeah. And a break is better than you're out of here.
Right.
I mean, if it's coming to a point where this person's causing a serious, like dangerous situation coming to the market and harassing, obviously that's a different situation. But if this person's just struggling and kind of having a little breakdown and,
a little spiral,
a little spiraling out, saying, hey, like take a little break. And then usually a break will kind of either fix the problem, they come back, or they'll, say, okay, you know what, a break is what I needed to really realize that this isn't working for me anymore. And I can't come back and that's it.
Those are happy endings.
Yep. They both work for everybody. So yeah, but like Kat said, definitely document everything that's going on. Send that vendor emails and just say, hey, this is what you did today at the market. That doesn't fall within our rules and guidelines. Like this is unprofessional or inappropriate. So you have those emails where you might get a big long email in response, but honestly, it's worth it just to say, I'm acknowledging that this is what you're doing, because if you ever do have to take a legal route for any reason, you're going to need that documentation and not just say, oh, he's been doing this for months.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Actually, there's a whole bunch of conversations going on now in various of our platforms about things that have just reached a peak. And in many of those instances, it's a situation that's reached a peak based on a bunch of conversations, but they haven't put anything in writing. And that's not going to benefit either side of those disagreements.
Yeah. Yeah.
So document. But sadly, but truly, that's just how you have to deal with it. This is a business.
Yeah.
That's how you have to deal with things.
And I mean, one last suggestion is just to kind of, like we're saying with your market rules, maybe take a look at your market rules and refresh it and put something in there about, hey, if you have questions about how to increase sales or improve your display, please ask us. Or here's 3 tips that we've found are really helpful, and kind of get ahead of it and make it clear that you're there to help the vendors succeed.
Right.
I mean, some vendors have an approach that we just want their booth fee and then we don't care what they do at the market. And that's really, I've never seen a market manager that acts like that. Yeah. It's, if like a market calls out.
Vendors mean successful markets.
Yes. Like we want your business to succeed. We want you to grow and thrive, and we want you to get a great shopper following, and we want you to be happy to come to the market and to leave happy because you had a great day of sales. So maybe just being really clear and explicit about that, just so vendors know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So clarity.
All right. Next up, this is certainly not an easy one to come up with an answer for, but we can make some suggestions. It's fire season in the US and Canada, and a number of markets have had to close their markets on 1 week or sometimes for a stretch of weeks
Mhm.
due to unhealthy air quality. I spend part of my time in Philly, and we have had orange air there for a
Mm.
while off and on from the fires in Canada. How do you make that call? And question from a farmer that we had is, what do I do if my market's canceled? I've already picked. I've already picked my produce. Now
Yeah.
what do I do?
Yeah. That's tough for any kind of closure for any reason.
So some experienced managers in our group were able to chime in. A lot of the Midwestern managers and Eastern managers are having this problem right now due to the airflow from Canada, because Canada's having a huge problem with wildfires.
Mhm.
And some of our, particularly California and Oregon and Washington managers, because the Pacific Northwest has had such bad fires for the last few years, were able to chime in and give some advice about how you make that call and how you measure your air quality and all those good things. And one of them mentioned airnow.gov, and a couple more chimed in and said, yes, I use that too,
Mm.
which gives you kind of a clear understanding of what the air quality is in your area and at what point it becomes actually dangerous to be outside and be in that.
Yeah, you have to keep an eye on that too, so you can make a call for your market.
So, I mean, some of the questions are, how far in advance do you cancel? So there's nothing more frustrating. I mean, this is not dangerous like air quality is, but for us, it's always about rain.
Yeah,
So
or wind
yeah,
particularly.
you get a forecast of rain. You want to
Mhm.
give people plenty of notice that the market's canceled so they don't pick, or if they're a baker, they don't bake if there's not going
Mhm.
to be a market. So you call it, and then the forecast changes, and there you are with a closed market and a bright sunny day and very angry shoppers and vendors.
Kat has PTSD from closing a market because El Nino was coming to sweep us all away and can't actually canceled a market. This was like 12 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And the next day it was like the most beautiful day you can imagine. Blue skies, not a single cloud, not a single raindrop. And the
Lots of
shoppers,
complaints.
yeah, shoppers came out to shop because why would they think that the
Why
market would
would
be
they not?
closed? Yep. And the vendors were mad because they already baked and picked and all the things. And so
It's
that's
tough.
stuck
It's
in our
such a tough
brains.
call. So we
Yeah.
don't have an answer for that. We have suggestions. Check that air now. I would say you want to get as close to the market as you can before you cancel to make sure you're really dealing with that condition.
Hmm.
But then the second that you just have to make that call, first and foremost, you've got to get out to your vendors and farmers so that they, as much as possible, mitigate any preparation that they're doing for that market. Or if you might have vendors that are far away. We've got some markets where, especially like the DC area or New York, they draw from 3 or 4 states. And
Hmm.
and we have certain crops that we can only host California farmers, but certain crops in California are only grown much way far north of us. People are driving 3 and 4 hours to get to our markets.
Hmm.
You want to give them notice so they don't put somebody on the road with product and then have you cancel. That's the most frustrating thing for them.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it's hard to make that call. Like we said, we don't have the answer, but trying to get as close to the timing as possible, not putting anybody in danger, trying to help prevent people baking and picking and harvesting for a market that's not going to happen. But again, not calling it too far in advance so you don't end up with people missing out on a day of sales and a day of shopping.
Right.
So yeah, figuring out that timing is tough, but having some like graphics for social media kind of set up already so you can just blast those out
Really
as
smart.
soon as something happens. Yes, our wonderful intern is helping us with that right now, kind of zhuzhing our graphics and messaging for if the market has to close, which, and I mean, our San Diego market barely ever closes, but we did have a couple. We had 2 wind days this year, which was really, really odd, but wind is really our like nemesis at the market. So, but having that stuff ready to go, having an email newsletter just kind of pre-typed that you can just pull up and shoot out, because if you're dealing with a market that's closing, you don't have time to sit there and like analyze all this stuff and make a plan for what to send out. You want to have that protocol already ready to go because you're going to feel a little panicked and having to juggle phone calls from shoppers and vendors and all that stuff. So,
And then you're not feeling real creative at that moment about what
yeah,
to put on Canva. Yeah.
yeah,
and
for sure.
onto Instagram to because as soon as you let your vendors and farmers know, I
Mhm.
mean, next up, obviously, you want to let those shoppers know. You want to give
Yeah,
them a heads up. And
yeah.
then you have to steel yourself for their reactions, because if you stay open in a dicey situation, you'll get lots of comments from shoppers about, how could you make these people come to the market in this kind of condition? And then you'll get a whole bunch of other shoppers saying, why didn't all of your farmers show up?
Yeah.
Even though they would have to come through floods to get to you.
Yeah, if we close for wind and people were like, "Oh, they could have been here."
Yeah, so, you're gonna have customers that are happy if you just power through and stay open through a
Mm.
thing, and then you're gonna have shoppers that are mad if you do that because we're putting everybody in danger. And, think back to peak COVID, you're gonna get those kind of reactions.
Yes.
They're gonna go all different directions.
Hopefully, I will say that I do get a lot of people that were like, people that will be frustrated to begin with, and then they'll understand later in the day. So
Yeah, true.
just
Yeah,
let them kind of
right.
work it out on their own.
That's true. Yeah, we don't get into a lot of trying to argue with somebody about what their opinion is of whether we should be open or not.
No, I'm just saying, oh, so sorry about that. Bye. And then they'll just come to the market next week and say, hey, how's it going? I'm like, you yelled at me on social media, but you know what? I forgive you.
Absolutely.
All
We
right.
did have a couple of markets that, in addition to having backup plans for social media and that kind of thing, have a backup plan in terms of access to an indoor space.
Oh, yeah. That's clever.
And sometimes the indoor space won't be as large as your usual market, but typically if you're dealing with bad weather or bad air quality or that, you'll have a certain amount of farmers and vendors that just don't want to risk it. And yeah, I think you have to be really understanding in that kind of situation that if they don't want to come, they just, they can't come. Some of them can't come. And sometimes we're in an urban area and it's rainy. And it's kind of a hassle, but we're going to be there anyway in the rain.
Yeah.
But they're in a rural area that's 40 miles from us, and their microclimate is making things flooded, and they can't get their truck off the farm because the road's flooded out and that kind of thing. So you have to be understanding that what you're experiencing is not necessarily exactly the same as what your farmer is experiencing in their area.
Yeah. They might not want to, even if it's not raining too hard, if it's going to rain later in the day, they might think that they can drive off their farm, but maybe they can't drive back onto their farm later. And that's going to cause problems, including family situations where they need to get back to their family. So just being understanding about that stuff as a whole kind of.
It's not easy. All that kind of stuff's really stressful, but just, trying to understand we're all humans and doing the best we can. As to the farmer that's asking, what do I do if my market's canceled? That's super frustrating.
Yeah.
Same goes for bakers. Anybody that's got a product that may not last until the next market.
Yeah.
You're just losing that product. So you want to be, again, anything that you can have kind of in your pocket that's a plan B for when something goes sideways so that you can just implement that. That's great. You want to get out on your own social media and you want to maybe have a system where people can pick up from you at some central point, or you may have a group of farmers and vendors that kind of get together and assemble a box that a customer can come get all the essentials by picking up at one point. I mean, I know during peak COVID, Bridget had a deal with a farmer and a couple of other vendors where she would go pick up a whole truckload of boxes of their produce, and then she would set up on her patio, and there was just a set price for that box, so it didn't get too complicated as far as she's not running a farm booth, but she was allowing people to Venmo or however they paid the farmer, and then they could come to her patio and pick up that box. You want to have those backup plans where there's ways to get it out. Or if you have a farm stand that's accessible in that kind of weather, which it may not be, you want to have social media messaging set up where you can say, hey, we can't get to the market, but you can still get our product. Or we had, I know, a cheese shop that made a deal with some of our farmers and our bakers where they could drop a box at the cheese shop and somebody could come pick it up there. So you just need all that messaging for your plan Bs to get out there quickly and tell people how they can buy your product. Yeah.
Very, very helpful, again, to plan ahead for those kind of things and just think about what would your plan be if something like that happened at the market. So whether you're a manager or a farmer or a vendor, what are you going to do in that situation? And just planning ahead will just save so much heartbreak and panic.
Yeah, because during that kind of, it's hard to come up with those creative ideas when you're in that stress. I think one of our bakers actually delivered.
Oh yeah,
last time.
Our little wheat baker. Yeah. She delivered to me at my house. Needed some biscuits. Yeah, so making a plan ahead of time. All right, so our last question is, one of our longtime vendors has bought a food truck and wants to bring it to market. It'll take up way more space than his tent, obviously, and it's out of scale compared to the other vendors. Should I let him bring the truck? And isn't it fair to charge him for 2 spaces or more?
So there are areas where farmers markets are only allowed to sell hot food from food trucks. They're not allowed to have a vendor that's setting up and cooking in a tent and selling.
Yeah, because food trucks have a hand washing sink usually, and they have refrigeration and all those things. So the health department kind of prefers that sometimes, or you're in an area where maybe that's what's allowed.
So they would love to have your problem. And isn't that the case actually on a lot of problems? Sometimes it seems like a problem to you, but somebody else would love to have that.
Love
problem.
that.
So,
but if you have an all tent market and someone wants to bring a truck, it just adds a different dynamic to the market for sure.
Does.
We see a lot of markets that have both. We have all tent markets except for our one coffee truck. So we do understand that a big truck in the market throws another kind of curveball at you when you're trying to think about how what's going to change in the dynamic of the market. Yeah,
how you arrange it. For one thing, I think you have to, if you're not only using trucks for food, if you're using both trucks and tents, and you're taking a truck, which is clearly going to take up probably twice the space of a tent, we often explain to applicants that your truck is so much bigger, we would have to charge you for a full 2 spaces. And so you have to think about, you, Mr. Vendor, food truck vendor, is what you're selling Is it at a price point? Are you going to generate enough volume that it makes sense for you to pay for 2 full spaces at a market? So, because it's just a whole different kind of financial calculation. And then I find that, if you get a food truck gathering, or if you have a market where you've got 5 food trucks, they work great. People are just attuned to, I got to look up to order. But if you have a market that's almost all tents and then you plop a food truck in there, I find that the food trucks, their sales are not as good because everything else in the market is at eye level. And so customers will just scoot by the food truck. It doesn't occur to them to look up and make contact with the person that's selling there, because the rest of the market is attuned to, we're at an eye level, face-to-face kind of sales situation.
Yeah, I find that to be true as well. And as a customer for myself, when I go to events that are a mix of tents and food trucks, it's like, I feel like that's weird. Now I have to look up, and it's like noisy. And so just people are used to food trucks, I feel like, at this point in our lives, but you do have to think about that from a market management standpoint and from the food truck owner's standpoint. Would it be better if you stayed in your tent? Right. So trying to figure that out. But yes, definitely if you're at a market that is maxed out on capacity, you want to charge more for food truck space. And that's just kind of like, hey, I could have 2 food tent vendors here, and they would pay a fair price for each space. And so if you're going to take up 2 spaces, that's what you're going to pay. So
that's just fair.
That's just fair. It's kind of how it is. So if you have a space where you can spread everyone out and food trucks can just come on in, then you can just charge them whatever everyone else is paying for a food booth.
Yeah, we've done that at especially really small new markets,
Yeah,
where you're really trying to fill space and make your market look like it's growing and look like it's full. Sometimes if you got that kind of market going on, it's great to have a food truck, even if they're only paying for 1 space, because it just looks more full, looks more busy.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you get a good food truck, the well-run food trucks tend to have their own social media followings and things. And sometimes those folks can actually bring folks to your market that you wouldn't otherwise see.
Yeah.
So you can, if you can, it's all a balance of things that are happening when you make those decisions. The one other thing that we do find is food trucks add a different level of how many issues do your farmers or vendors have to deal with in order to arrive at your market on time consistently. And so in addition to figuring out availability of supplies and do they have enough labor and do they have an employee to work that market, now they also need to make sure that their compressors hasn't gone down and that their transmission is working and that there's no flat tire situation.
Yeah, food trucks seem to add a little bit more of like a hindrance layer of getting to the market. So we have had that experience with many food trucks that we've had in the past at our markets before. It's just one more reason why folks have a hard time getting in the market sometimes. So kind of keeping that in mind. But if you get a good food truck who's doing a great job and really has a handle on all those issues, it can be a great thing to have at the market.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing more fun than a food truck with fun branding on it.
For sure.
So we hope these questions are some of the same ones you've had in your mind or that you're dealing with or that you may have to deal with in the future. And these answers and insights have been helpful. If you have a question for Farmers Market Pros, email us at connect@farmersmarketpros.com. You can direct message us on Instagram. We're at Farmers Market Pros there, and same on Facebook, although we tend to check messages on Instagram more often. I would strongly recommend, if you're going to message us on social media, use Instagram. You can comment on any of our other posts with your questions. We just love to hear from you, however it is that you want to get to us.
Yeah. And one last reminder about our countdown to National Farmers Market Week and how we want to hear from you. So share your National Farmers Market Week plans with our Tent Talk podcast listeners by sending us a voice memo and get on that episode next week.
Love to hear from you. Love our community. Thank you to Sticker Mule for helping small farmers and food makers and farmers market managers promote their products and events with easy online ordering and quick delivery of labels and promotional products, and for helping to make this episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast, possible. Our online classes, annual conference, and consulting services have let us create this free content every week for coming on 5 years. To place your order with Sticker Mule, click their logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app, YouTube, or wherever you access this podcast, and tell us how you're enjoying Tent Talk. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Connect with fellow farmers market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community. Follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros and find online education and other resources on our website at farmersmarketpros.com. Don't forget to sign up for our email newsletter while you're there. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was produced by Haley Pascalades. Original music by David Mead. Join us next week for another great episode.